I only left for 3 days. Just a short trip to see my sister. When I came back, everything changed. I drove down the dirt road to my farm. This land belonged to my family for over 100 years. My grandfather gave it to my father. My father gave it to me. Something was wrong. I saw big tire tracks in the mud. My fence was gone. I drove around the bend and hit my brakes hard. I couldn't believe what I saw. Workers in yellow vests were all over my cornfield. Big bulldozers were tearing up my crops. They put orange flags in a straight line across my entire farm. What's happening here? I yelled as I jumped out of my truck. Where my corn was growing just 3 days ago, they were building a runway. An actual airport runway. Right through my farm. I saw a man looking at some papers. I walked up to him, angry. Hey! What are you doing? This is my land. The man barely looked at me. You can't be here. This is a work site. Work site? This is my farm. Now he looked annoyed. Not anymore. This is going to be the new airport. If you have questions, talk to the HOA office. HOA? What HOA? My farm isn't part of any HOA. He handed me a card. Pine Ridge HOA. They're in charge of the airport project now. I watched the bulldozers destroy my family's land. I saw workers marking spots for buildings near my old barn. What they didn't know was who I really am. My name is Michael Johnson. And I'm the county sheriff. But I didn't tell them that yet. First, I needed to find out who was behind this. And they were going to pay for what they did to my farm. I walked closer to the construction site. The workers looked at me like I was trespassing on my own land. Who's in charge here? I demanded. A tall man with a clipboard came over. I'm Frank, the site manager. You need to leave, sir. This is a restricted area. This is my farm, I said, trying to stay calm. I have the deed to prove it. Frank shook his head. Not according to my paperwork. The HOA has legal rights to build here now. I pulled out my phone and showed him photos of my property. Look. This is my house. My barn. My fields. I never gave anyone permission to build here. Talk to the HOA, Frank said, not caring. They showed us all the papers. Everything is approved. Who signed these approvals? I asked. Mrs. Eleanor Watson. She's the HOA president. All the permits have her signature. I took pictures of the construction with my phone. Frank tried to stop me. No photos allowed of the project, he said. I'm documenting damage to MY property, I replied. An older worker came over. His name tag said Bill. He looked uncomfortable. Listen, Bill whispered when Frank walked away. This whole thing happened fast. Too fast. Mrs. Watson pushed it through last week. They started the moment they saw you leave town. How did they know I was gone? I asked. Bill looked around nervously. They've been watching your place. Waiting for a chance. I thanked Bill for the information. As I walked back to my truck, I noticed a fancy black SUV parked at the edge of my property. A woman in expensive clothes was taking photos of the construction. I walked over to her. Excuse me, are you with the HOA? She looked surprised to see me. I'm Eleanor Watson, Pine Ridge HOA president. And you are? Michael Johnson. The owner of this farm you're destroying. Her smile disappeared. Mr. Johnson. I thought you were out of town. This land is now part of our airport project. The community needs this. I never agreed to any airport, I said. My farm isn't even part of your HOA. Eleanor laughed. Check your property lines, Mr. Johnson. Your farm borders Pine Ridge Estates. Section 47B of our agreement covers adjacent properties for essential community projects. That's not legal, I said. It's all perfectly legal, she replied, her voice cold. We've already started construction. There's nothing you can do now. What she didn't know was that I dealt with people like her every day as county sheriff. But I kept my badge in my pocket. I needed to gather evidence first. We'll see about that, I said, walking away. I heard her on the phone as I left. He's back early. Move up the schedule. We need that runway finished by Friday. I drove straight to the county records office. Lisa, who worked at the front desk, smiled when she saw me. Sheriff Johnson. What brings you here today? I need to check some property records, Lisa. Something strange is happening at my farm. I explained about the airport construction. Lisa looked shocked. An airport? On your family's farm? Let me check if there are any permits filed. She typed on her computer, searching through recent applications. That's weird, Lisa said after a few minutes. There's nothing here for an airport project. No permits, no environmental studies, no applications. Nothing. Are you sure? Check under Pine Ridge HOA or Eleanor Watson. Lisa searched again. Here's something. Pine Ridge Regional Airport Authority. Filed just last week. But it's not a real permit, it's just a name registration. Can I see it? The document showed Eleanor Watson had created a fake airport authority with herself as chairperson. It wasn't a government agency at all. Just a made-up name to sound official. This is illegal, I said. They can't just invent a fake authority. There's more, Lisa said, looking worried. They've submitted paperwork claiming your property falls under adjacent property rules for the HOA. But I checked the original HOA boundaries from when Pine Ridge Estates was built. Your farm is clearly outside their jurisdiction. I took copies of everything and thanked Lisa. Next, I visited Tom Garcia at the Environmental Protection Office. Mike, they can't build an airport there, Tom said after hearing my story. Your farm has protected wetlands on the east side. There's a rare species of spotted frog that lives there. Eleanor Watson didn't seem concerned about frogs, I said. Tom shook his head. She should be. Disturbing that habitat without proper studies is a federal offense. By afternoon, I had gathered enough evidence to know this was completely illegal. I decided to visit the HOA office directly. The Pine Ridge HOA headquarters was in a fancy building with gold lettering on the door. Inside, a receptionist looked up. I need to speak with Eleanor Watson, I said. Do you have an appointment? Tell her Michael Johnson is here about the airport on his farm. 5 minutes later, I was sitting across from Eleanor in her large office. Framed photos showed her with local politicians and business leaders. Mr. Johnson, she said with a fake smile. I hope you've come to your senses about our airport project. I've been doing some research, I said. There are no legal permits filed for construction. The airport authority you created isn't a real government agency. And you're destroying protected wetlands. Eleanor's smile didn't change, but her eyes hardened. Minor paperwork issues, she said, waving her hand. Everything will be filed properly. The airport is happening, Mr. Johnson. We have powerful supporters. Who exactly wants this airport? I asked. The regular homeowners in Pine Ridge? This is about progress, she said, avoiding my question. Property values will increase. We'll have convenience for travelers. I placed the wetlands protection documents on her desk. Building here is a federal offense. For the first time, Eleanor looked nervous. She glanced at the papers, then quickly recovered. We've done our environmental studies. Those wetlands aren't significant. That's not what the county environmental office says. Eleanor stood up, signaling our meeting was over. Mr. Johnson, fighting this will only cost you money and time. The construction continues tomorrow. I suggest you accept our generous compensation offer. What offer? Nobody offered me anything. Check your mail, she said coldly. We sent you notice weeks ago. I knew she was lying. But I was starting to understand what was happening. This wasn't just about an airport. Something bigger was going on. As I left her office, I was more determined than ever to stop this project and expose Eleanor Watson's scheme. The next morning, I put on regular clothes instead of my sheriff's uniform. I needed to talk to people without them knowing who I was yet. First, I visited my closest neighbor, old Mr. Peterson. He'd lived next to our farm for over 40 years. Mike. Good to see you, he said, inviting me in for coffee. Have you seen what they're doing to your land? It's criminal. I'm trying to understand why, I said. Why would the HOA suddenly want an airport here? Mr. Peterson leaned forward. It's not for the community. That's just what they're telling everyone. I overheard 2 board members talking at the grocery store last week. This airport is for private planes only for rich folks in the new luxury homes they're planning. Luxury homes? Where? They want to build them all around the airport. Like one of those fancy fly-in communities where rich people park their planes next to their houses. This explained a lot. I thanked Mr. Peterson and visited more neighbors. Each one shared another piece of the puzzle. Mrs. Gonzalez told me the HOA had been pressuring people near my farm to sell their homes. The Jenkins family said Eleanor's husband owned a real estate company that would be developing the luxury homes. By noon, I had a clearer picture. This wasn't about a community airport. It was about Eleanor and her husband getting rich by building a private airpark for wealthy people. I drove to the county environmental office to meet Tom again. He had more documents ready. These are the protected species forms, Tom explained, showing me official papers. The wetlands on your property are home to the Meadowville spotted frog. There are only about 200 left in the wild. Disturbing their habitat requires special federal permits. Did the HOA apply for these permits? I asked. No. And they never would get approval anyway. That habitat is classified as critical. Next, I visited my friend Judge Williams at the courthouse. I showed him everything I'd gathered. Mike, this is serious, the judge said. They're violating multiple laws, building without permits, destroying protected habitat, misrepresenting a private development as community infrastructure. What's my best move here? I asked. Document everything. Get statements from witnesses. Then we can file for an emergency injunction to stop construction. I spent the rest of the day gathering more evidence. I took photos of the wetlands and the construction damage. I recorded statements from neighbors who had overheard HOA board discussions about the real plans. Around 5 p.m., I got a call from Bill, the construction worker who had talked to me earlier. Sheriff Johnson? I didn't know that was you yesterday, he said, sounding nervous. There's something you should know. They're bringing in heavy equipment tomorrow to drain the wetlands. Mrs. Watson told us to get rid of all the water before any inspectors can see it. Thanks for telling me, Bill. And for the record, I didn't mention I was the sheriff yesterday. Everyone knows now, Bill said. Mrs. Watson is furious. She's been making calls all day trying to pressure people at the county office. I decided it was time to visit the construction site again, this time officially. I put on my uniform and drove to my farm. The workers froze when they saw my sheriff's vehicle pull up. Frank, the site manager, looked especially uncomfortable. Afternoon, gentlemen, I said, stepping out in full uniform. I'm Sheriff Michael Johnson. I'm here to inform you that this construction site is operating without legal permits. All work needs to stop immediately. Frank stuttered. Mrs. Watson said everything was approved. She lied to you, I replied. There are no permits. And tomorrow's plans to drain the wetlands would violate federal environmental laws. I placed official notices on the equipment. This site is now under investigation. Anyone continuing work here could face charges. The workers began packing up. None of them wanted legal trouble. As I was leaving, I got a call from Eleanor Watson. "Sheriff Johnson," she said, her voice tight with anger. "You're making a serious mistake." "The mistake was yours," I replied calmly. "Building an illegal airport on my farm." "This project has the support of very important people," she threatened. "People who can affect your career." "Are you threatening an elected county sheriff?" "I'd be careful about that, Mrs. Watson." I hung up, knowing tomorrow would bring the real showdown. That evening, I called a meeting at my house. Judge Williams came, along with Tom from the Environmental Office and Lisa from County Records. My sister Sarah drove over from the next county. "Thanks for coming," I said as everyone gathered in my living room. "Tomorrow is important. We need to stop this airport project completely." "The evidence is solid," Judge Williams said. "Eleanor Watson and the HOA have broken multiple laws. But they're still planning to drain the wetlands tomorrow," I reminded everyone. "We need to prevent that from happening." Tom held up his phone. "I've contacted the Federal Environmental Protection Agency. They're sending someone, but they won't arrive until afternoon." "That's too late," Lisa said. "According to what I've heard, they're starting at 7 a.m. My sister Sarah, always practical, asked the obvious question. "Mike, why not just arrest them for building without permits?" "I could," I admitted, "but I want more than just a construction violation. Eleanor Watson has been bullying this entire community. I want to expose everything." Judge Williams nodded. A public confrontation would send a stronger message. We spent the next hour planning our strategy. Lisa would bring the official property records showing my farm was outside HOA jurisdiction. Tom would prepare the environmental protection documents. Judge Williams would draft an emergency injunction. "I've also called Channel 8 News," I said. "They're interested in the story of an HOA trying to build an airport without permits." "What about the other homeowners?" Sarah asked. "Do they know what's really happening?" "Good point," I said. "The HOA has been telling everyone this is a community airport. They don't know it's really for luxury private homes." We decided to invite key community members to witness tomorrow's confrontation. I called Mr. Peterson, Mrs. Gonzalez, and several others who had been pressured by the HOA in the past. Before everyone left, I laid out the timeline for tomorrow. The workers arrive at 7 a.m. We let them set up, but before they start draining the wetlands, we move in. I'll lead as sheriff, with Judge Williams and Tom providing legal and environmental authority. Lisa will have all the records ready. "What about me?" Sarah asked. "I need you to coordinate with the news crew. Make sure they capture everything." After my guests left, I sat on my porch looking out at my damaged farm. In the distance, I could see the construction equipment sitting silent under the moonlight. Tomorrow would be the final showdown with Eleanor Watson. She picked the wrong farm to build her airport on, I said to myself. At 6 a.m., I put on my full sheriff's uniform, including my badge and official hat. I made sure everything was perfectly in order. This wasn't just about me defending my own property, this was about upholding the law. I called my deputy, Mark, who would bring additional officers for support. "We're not expecting trouble," I told him, "but I want a show of authority." "Understood, Sheriff," Mark replied. "We'll be there at 7:30. I watched the sunrise over my farm, feeling a mix of sadness and determination. My cornfields were torn up, the soil exposed and vulnerable. But I would make this right. As I drove down to the construction site, I saw workers already arriving. Eleanor Watson's black SUV was parked near the makeshift construction office, a trailer set up at the edge of my property. It was time to end this once and for all. At exactly 7:30 a.m., our plan began. I parked my sheriff's vehicle in front of the construction trailer, lights flashing. 2 deputy cars pulled in behind me. The Channel 8 news van arrived moments later. Workers stopped what they were doing, looking confused. I saw the large pumping equipment they had brought to drain the wetlands. They were just about to start. Eleanor Watson stepped out of the trailer, flanked by Frank the site manager and a man in an expensive suit I didn't recognize. "What's the meaning of this?" she demanded, then noticed the news camera. Her tone immediately changed. "Sheriff Johnson, is there a problem?" I approached with my full team: Judge Williams, Tom from Environmental Services, Lisa with the county records, and several respected community members. "Mrs. Watson, I'm here officially to shut down this illegal construction project," I said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "This is ridiculous," Eleanor replied. "We have all necessary approvals." I motioned to Lisa, who stepped forward with her documents. "County records show no permits were filed for this construction," I announced. "Furthermore, this farm property is outside HOA jurisdiction according to the original Pine Ridge Estate's boundaries." The man in the expensive suit whispered something to Eleanor. She looked worried for the first time. "We filed everything through the Regional Airport Authority," she insisted. "The authority you created last week?" I asked. "That's not a legitimate government agency, Mrs. Watson. You can't just make up official-sounding names." The news reporter moved closer with her camera. This was getting good. "Additionally," I continued, "this construction is destroying protected wetlands that are home to an endangered species." Tom stepped forward with his environmental documents and photos of the Meadowville spotted frogs. "Federal law prohibits disturbing this habitat," Tom explained to the camera. "The fines start at $100,000 per violation." Eleanor's face was getting red. "This community needs an airport." The board voted. "About that," I interrupted. "I've spoken with several board members who say they were told this would be a community airport." "But that's not true, is it?" I pulled out copies of the real development plans that Mrs. Gonzalez had found. They showed luxury homes with private hangars surrounding a members-only airstrip. "You weren't building a community airport. You were building a private luxury development that would make you and your husband rich." Several workers began backing away from their equipment. They clearly hadn't known what they were really part of. The man in the suit, who I now realized must be Eleanor's husband, stepped forward. "We can discuss this privately, Sheriff. There's no need for cameras." "I think there is," I replied. "The people of Pine Ridge deserve to know what's happening." Eleanor suddenly changed tactics. "The HOA has legal authority over adjacent properties. Your farm is subject to our jurisdiction for community improvements." This was the moment I'd been waiting for. "Mrs. Watson, before building an airport on someone's land, you should really check who owns it. And maybe check what they do for a living." I stepped closer, making sure the camera caught everything. "You built your airport on my family's farm. Land that has been in my family for over 100 years. Land that is not under your HOA jurisdiction." I tapped my sheriff's badge. "And you did all this illegal construction without permits on the county sheriff's farm. Did you really think there would be no consequences?" The look on Eleanor's face was priceless. Her mouth opened but no words came out. The camera zoomed in on her shocked expression. Workers started putting down their tools and walking away. Nobody wanted to be part of this now. Judge Williams stepped forward with official papers. "Mrs. Watson, this is an emergency injunction ordering all construction to cease immediately. Furthermore, this document opens an official investigation into the Pine Ridge HOA for fraud, building without permits, environmental violations, and misrepresentation." It was over. Eleanor and her husband stood in stunned silence as deputies began placing official seizure notices on all the construction equipment. The news reporter moved in for a final statement. "Sheriff Johnson, what happens now?" "Now," I said, looking directly at Eleanor, "we restore the rule of law. No one is above it, not even HOA presidents who want to build airports." The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. News of the illegal airport spread quickly through the community and beyond. The Channel 8 news report went viral online with the headline, "HOA builds airport on Sheriff's farm without permits." The morning after our confrontation, I met with the county prosecutor to discuss criminal charges. Eleanor and her husband weren't going to walk away from this easily. "We have enough for multiple felony counts," the prosecutor said, reviewing my evidence. "Building without permits, environmental violations, fraud, falsifying official documents." "What about the other board members?" I asked. "We'll need to determine who knew what. Some may have been misled, others might have been willing participants." By afternoon, the county commissioners called an emergency meeting. I presented all the evidence, showing how Eleanor had created a fake airport authority to push through her private development. This wasn't about community benefit, I explained to the commissioners. This was about creating a luxury airpark development that would have made the Watsons millions while destroying protected habitat. The commissioners voted unanimously to launch a full investigation into the Pine Ridge HOA and to review regulations for all HOAs in the county. Meanwhile, at my farm, environmental specialists arrived to assess the damage to the wetlands. Fortunately, we had stopped the construction before they drained the water. "The frogs should be okay," Tom told me as we walked the property. "We'll need to restore the disturbed areas, but the core habitat is still intact." The HOA held their own emergency meeting that evening. With cameras rolling, angry homeowners packed the community center. Many were learning for the first time that the community airport was actually a private luxury development. "You lied to all of us," shouted Mrs. Gonzalez, standing up to confront the board members. "We never approved this." Robert Chin, one of the board members who claimed he'd been misled, called for Eleanor's immediate removal as president. The vote was unanimous. 3 days after the confrontation, formal charges were filed against Eleanor and her husband. They were arrested at their home, the images of them being escorted to police cars making the front page of the local newspaper. The charges were extensive: fraud, building without permits, environmental violations, falsifying government documents, and misuse of HOA funds. The evidence was overwhelming. "They're facing up to 5 years in prison," Judge Williams told me over coffee. "And civil penalties that could reach millions." The construction equipment was removed from my farm, and restoration experts began repairing the damage. The county even provided funds to help restore my cornfields. Pine Ridge residents elected a completely new HOA board, with strict new bylaws to prevent any similar abuse of power. The new president, Robert Chin, visited me personally. "Sheriff Johnson, on behalf of Pine Ridge, I want to apologize," he said sincerely. "What happened to your farm was inexcusable." "It wasn't the community's fault," I assured him. "It was Eleanor Watson abusing her power." "We're making changes to ensure this never happens again," Robert promised. "New rules require multiple approvals for any major decisions, complete transparency, and no jurisdiction claims beyond our actual boundaries." A week after the shutdown, I hosted a community event at my farm. Neighbors from Pine Ridge and surrounding areas came to help plant new trees along the damaged areas. Children were especially excited to see the environmental team showing off the rare spotted frogs in their protected habitat. Sarah brought homemade lemonade for the volunteers. "You did good, big brother," she said, watching people working together to heal the land. "It wasn't just me," I replied. Once people knew the truth, they stood up against the corruption. As we worked to restore the wetlands, a black car pulled up. Eleanor's teenage daughter stepped out, looking uncomfortable. "Sheriff Johnson," she said quietly. "I wanted to apologize for what my parents did. I had no idea." "It's not your fault," I told her. "But thank you for coming." She handed me an envelope. "These are the original plans for your farm. Mom had them in her office. I thought you should have them." Inside were detailed drawings of the luxury airpark they had planned, dozens of million-dollar homes with private hangars, all built around a central runway that cut right through the heart of my family's farm. The final resolution came a month later when Eleanor and her husband accepted a plea deal. They would serve 18 months in prison, pay substantial fines, and cover all costs of restoring my farm and the wetlands. At the sentencing, the judge made his position clear. "Mrs. Watson, you abused your position of authority for personal gain, with no regard for the law, the environment, or the rights of property owners. This court sentences you not just for the illegal construction, but for the breach of trust you committed against your entire community. 6 months later, my farm was beginning to heal. The construction scars were fading as new crops grew where bulldozers had once torn through the soil. The wetlands were thriving, with environmental experts reporting that the frog population was actually increasing. I stood on my porch on a warm Sunday afternoon, watching volunteers from the community planting native wildflowers along the restored wetland edge. This had become a monthly tradition, neighbors coming together to help repair the damage. "Coffee, Sheriff?" Mrs. Gonzalez handed me a steaming mug as she joined me on the porch. "Thanks," I said, taking a grateful sip. "And please, just call me Michael. I'm not on duty today." "You'll always be sheriff to us," she smiled. "The man who stood up to Eleanor Watson and saved our community." The case had changed things far beyond my farm. The county had implemented new regulations for all HOAs, now known as the Johnson Rules. These required complete transparency, prohibited jurisdiction claims beyond actual boundaries, and mandated environmental reviews for any significant projects. Eleanor and her husband were still serving their prison sentences. Their luxury home had been sold to pay for damages and fines. The new HOA board, led by Robert Chin, had transformed Pine Ridge into a model of good governance. "Did you see the newspaper this morning?" Mrs. Gonzalez asked. "The state legislature is using our case to draft new laws regulating HOAs throughout the state." I nodded. Some good came from all this mess. My phone rang, it was Sarah calling. "Turn on Channel 8, she said excitedly. "They're doing a special report on HOA reforms across the state. They're interviewing Robert right now." I switched on the TV, where Robert Chin was speaking thoughtfully about the lessons learned. "What happened with the airport project showed us how easily power can be abused," he was saying. "The new regulations ensure that homeowners' rights are protected while still maintaining community standards." The reporter turned to the camera. "The illegal airport that nearly destroyed a century-old family farm has instead become the catalyst for statewide reforms. All because Eleanor Watson didn't realize she was building on the county sheriff's land." After the segment ended, I walked out to the restored wetlands. A group of children were being given a tour by Tom, learning about the importance of protecting natural habitats. "And these spotted frogs," Tom was explaining, "are found nowhere else in the world. By saving this wetland, Sheriff Johnson helped save an entire species." The children looked at me with wide eyes as I approached. "Are you really the sheriff whose farm they tried to build an airport on?" a small boy asked. "I am," I confirmed with a smile. "Were you scared when all the bulldozers came?" a little girl wondered. "Not scared," I told her. "Just determined to protect what was important." As the sun began to set, most of the volunteers headed home. I walked the perimeter of my property, appreciating the peace that had returned to my family's land. In the distance, I could see the lights of Pine Ridge Estates. No longer a community divided, but neighbors who had found their voice against corruption. My grandfather used to say that land tells stories if you listen carefully enough. This land had certainly witnessed quite a story, one of greed and abuse of power, but also of justice and community healing. I stopped by the old oak tree where generations of my family had carved their initials. Running my fingers over the weathered marks, I thought about adding something new. Maybe not just my initials, but a reminder of what had happened here. As I headed back to the house, I saw Judge Williams pulling up the driveway. "Evening, Sheriff," he called. "Brought you the final settlement papers. The court approved the last of the restoration funding today." We sat on the porch reviewing the documents. Everything was finally resolved, justice served, land restored, community healed. "You know," Judge Williams said thoughtfully, "Eleanor Watson could have picked any piece of land for her scheme." I nodded. "She chose the wrong farm." "She sure did," he agreed. "She built an airport on the county sheriff's land without checking who owned it first." Some people learn their lessons the hard way. As Judge Williams drove away, I looked out at my peaceful farm. The airport that never was had changed everything, not just for me, but for homeowners across the entire state. All because they didn't know they were messing with the county sheriff. 1 year after the bulldozers first arrived on my farm, we held a community celebration. Tables were set up near the restored wetlands, filled with homemade dishes brought by neighbors. Children played tag through the tall grass, and older folks sat in lawn chairs swapping stories. The transformation was amazing. Where construction equipment had torn up the earth, corn now grew tall and healthy. The wetlands were thriving, with more spotted frogs than ever before. My family's farm hadn't just been restored, it was better than ever. Robert Chin, the new HOA president, raised a glass for a toast. To Sheriff Michael Johnson, he announced, who taught us all that standing up for what's right matters, even when it seems impossible. Everyone applauded. I felt a little embarrassed by the attention but grateful for the support. After the toast, Mrs. Gonzalez pulled me aside. "Have you heard about Eleanor?" she asked quietly. I nodded. "She's being released next month. Early parole for good behavior. Are you worried she'll cause more trouble?" "No," I said confidently. "She lost everything, her position, her reputation, her money. I think she learned her lesson." The sun was setting as people began to pack up. Sarah helped me collect the empty plates and cups. "Your farm looks beautiful again," she said. "Grandpa would be proud." "Not just of the farm," I replied, but of how the community came together. As the last cars pulled away, I walked to the highest point of my property. From there, I could see across the entire farm, the fields, the wetlands, the old barn. No sign remained of the airport that almost destroyed it all. I thought about how close we had come to losing everything, and how one simple fact had changed the outcome. They hadn't bothered to check who owned this land before they started building. The county sheriff's farm was safe. The community was stronger. And somewhere in a prison cell, Eleanor Watson had plenty of time to think about her mistake. Sometimes justice comes from unexpected places. In this case, it came from a family farm that had stood for over 100 years, and the county sheriff who wasn't about to let anyone take it away. I smiled as I walked back to my house, knowing my land would remain in my family for generations to come. No airports. No luxury developments. Just a peaceful farm with a story to tell. A story about what happens when you build an airport on the wrong person's land.